Imagine standing inside a room with Adolf Hitler. You know that millions of lives are being destroyed by the war he helped unleash. You know that removing one man might change the course of history. And then you realize something terrifying. The weapon capable of killing him is sitting only a few feet away. No one in the room knows. The countdown has already begun. This sounds like the opening of a movie, but it actually happened. On July 20, 1944, a German army officer walked into Hitler's headquarters carrying a briefcase packed with explosives. He placed it beneath a conference table and walked away. Minutes later, the room exploded. Several people were killed or seriously wounded. The conspirators believed Hitler was dead, but he wasn't. And this wasn't the first time someone had tried to kill him. Years earlier, another German had hidden a bomb inside a Munich beer hall. Later, military officers tried to destroy Hitler's aircraft in midair. Others planned to kill him at close range. Again and again, the plans came within inches of succeeding, and yet Hitler survived. So how did these plots fail? Was it careful security? Was it extraordinary luck? Or was it simply a series of tiny decisions and unexpected events that changed history? Today, we're going back to some of the most remarkable attempts to assassinate Adolf Hitler and the moments when each one went wrong. Our story begins in 1939, just weeks after the outbreak of World War II. The man behind the first major plot wasn't a general. He wasn't a politician. He wasn't a wealthy industrialist or a senior government official. His name was Georg Elser. Elser was a German carpenter who had become convinced that Hitler was leading Germany toward catastrophe. He believes that if Hitler could be removed from power, the country might be pulled back from an even larger war, so he began planning. His target was the WWII in Munich. Every year on November 8, Hitler visited the beer hall to commemorate the failed beer hall putsch of 1923. That predictable tradition gave Elser something extremely valuable: a schedule, a location, and a reasonable expectation that Hitler would be there. For weeks, Elser secretly worked inside the building. He eventually carved out a hidden compartment inside a pillar near the speaker's platform. Then he placed a timed explosive inside it. The idea was simple: Hitler would stand near the pillar. The bomb would detonate and the Nazi leadership gathered around him would be caught in the blast. November 8, 1939, the hall was packed. Hitler arrived. He began his speech. And somewhere inside that pillar, a clock was counting down. Then, unexpectedly, Hitler changed his plans. Bad weather had disrupted his travel arrangements. Instead of staying longer, he decided to leave earlier than expected. At approximately 9:07 p.m., Hitler departed the building. 13 minutes later, the bomb exploded. The blast tore through the area around the speaker's platform. The building was heavily damaged. People were killed and dozens were injured, but Hitler was already gone. Elser had spent months preparing the assassination, yet his entire plan was defeated by a difference of just 13 minutes. After Germany went deeper into the war, reaching Hitler became increasingly difficult. His movements were protected. His schedule was tightly controlled. And anyone attempting to get close to him risked immediate arrest or death. But inside the German military, opposition to Hitler was growing. One of the officers involved was Henning von Treschow. Treschow had once believed Hitler could restore Germany's power, but the war on the Eastern Front changed his view. Hitler's military decisions, the growing destruction, and the crimes committed under the Nazi regime convinced Treschow that Hitler had to be stopped. Then, in March 1943, an opportunity appeared. Hitler was visiting German forces near Smolensk. Treschow and his associates began preparing a plan that was almost unbelievable in its simplicity. They would put a bomb on Hitler's airplane. The explosive was disguised inside a package. To anyone looking at it, it appeared to contain bottles of liquor, but hidden inside was an explosive device. Before Hitler's aircraft departed, the bomb was secretly activated. The plan depended on a delayed fuse. The conspirators expected the aircraft to explode after it was already in the air. And from the outside, the crash could potentially look like an accident. Hitler boarded the aircraft, the plane took off, and the conspirators waited. 30 minutes passed, then more time. But nothing happened. Hitler's aircraft landed safely. The bomb had failed. The exact reason has long been associated with the device's fuse and the conditions aboard the aircraft, including the cold environment that may have affected the mechanism. But now the conspirators faced a new problem. The bomb had not exploded. It was still there. If someone discovered what was inside that package, the entire resistance network could be exposed. Treschow had to remain calm. He contacted the officer carrying the package and claimed that the wrong item had been sent. The following day, an associate traveled to recover it. The bomb was retrieved, the explosives were removed from the immediate danger of discovery, and once again, Hitler survived. By late 1943, the German resistance was running out of options. Long-distance attacks had failed, the airplane bomb had failed, so the conspirators began looking for another opportunity. This time they wanted to get close, very close. One possibility came through military uniform demonstrations. Such events could place German officers near Hitler without immediately attracting suspicion. One officer considered for the mission was Axel von dem Busch. He had witnessed the brutality of the Nazi war in the East. For him, the issue was no longer simply military strategy. He believed Hitler's leadership was driving Germany toward destruction. The plan was direct. Busch would participate in a uniform presentation. He would approach Hitler. And at close range, he would detonate an explosive device. The attack would almost certainly kill the person carrying the bomb, but Busch was prepared to take that risk. Then something completely outside the conspirators' control happened. The railway car transporting the uniforms was destroyed during an Allied air raid. The demonstration was postponed. The opportunity disappeared. Later, Busch was seriously wounded in combat and could no longer carry out the mission. Another officer, Heinrich von Kleist, was considered for a similar attempt. Again, the plan depended on getting close enough to Hitler. Again, it failed. The meeting was cancelled. No presentation, no opportunity, no attack. Then came another chance. On July 7, 1944, a uniform presentation finally took place. Helmuth Stief, another officer connected to the resistance, had an opportunity to act. He was close to Hitler. The circumstances were favorable. The moment had finally arrived, but Stief hesitated. He did not detonate the bomb. Hitler walked away unharmed. At this point, Klaus von Stauffenberg understood something. Waiting for someone else to act might mean waiting forever. If there was going to be one final attempt, he might have to do it himself. By the summer of 1944, Germany's military position was deteriorating rapidly. The Soviet Red Army was advancing from the east. In the west, Allied forces had landed in Normandy. Germany was being squeezed from both directions, and inside the German military, some officers believed that Hitler was no longer simply losing the war. They believed he was destroying Germany itself. This was where Operation Valkyrie became crucial. Originally, Valkyrie was an emergency plan designed to maintain order inside Germany in the event of internal unrest. The resistance modified the plan. Their idea was bold. If Hitler were killed, they would activate Valkyrie. The army would take control of key locations. The SS would be isolated. Important Nazi officials would be arrested, and a new government could attempt to take control, but everything depended on one thing: Hitler had to be dead. On July 20, 1944, Klaus von Stauffenberg traveled to Hitler's headquarters, the Wolf's Lair in East Prussia. Officially, he was there to brief Hitler about the reserve army. But inside his briefcase was something far more dangerous: explosives. Stauffenberg entered the building with Werner von Heefen. They were given only a short time to prepare. Stauffenberg managed to arm one explosive charge. The second one was not activated. Then he entered the conference room. Inside were Hitler and senior military officers. Maps covered the table. Stauffenberg placed the briefcase beneath the table close to Hitler. Then he found an excuse to leave the room. The countdown had begun. Outside, Stauffenberg waited. Then, an enormous explosion. Windows shattered, smoke filled the room, wood and debris were thrown across the conference area. From outside, Stauffenberg saw the aftermath. He believed Hitler could not possibly have survived. He left the Wolf's Lair and returned to Berlin. The next stage of the coup began. Operation Valkyrie was activated, orders were issued, troops began moving, but there was one problem. Hitler was alive. The conference room's construction had helped reduce the force of the blast. The briefcase had also been moved to the other side of a heavy table support shortly before the explosion, and the room itself was not the sealed underground bunker the conspirators had expected. The explosion was devastating, but it wasn't enough. Hitler survived, and once word spread that he was still alive, the entire coup began to collapse. The conspirators in Berlin were now trapped. The assassination had failed, Hitler was alive, and the Nazi leadership was regaining control. At the Bendeler block in Berlin, Stauffenberg and several of his fellow conspirators were arrested. The resistance had lost. That same night, Stauffenberg, Werner von Heefen, Friedrich Albrecht, and Albrecht Merz von Quernheim were executed, but the repression did not stop there. The Nazi regime began hunting down anyone connected to the conspiracy. Arrests spread through the military and civilian resistance networks. Many suspects were brought before the People's Court. The trials were often little more than political spectacles designed to punish and intimidate. Some conspirators were executed, others took their own lives rather than be captured. Henning von Treschow, one of the key figures behind the earlier attempts, died on the Eastern Front rather than allow himself to be taken alive. Georg Elser, the carpenter whose bomb had exploded 13 minutes too late, was eventually executed at Dachau in April 1945. Looking back at these attempts, one detail stands out. None of the conspirators needed a miracle to succeed. They needed everything to go exactly as planned, but history rarely works that way. A train carrying uniforms was destroyed. A meeting was canceled, an officer hesitated, a bomb failed, a flight ended safely, and in the most famous attempt of all, a briefcase was moved only a short distance. Each of those tiny events helped determine what happened next. Could the Second World War have ended earlier if Hitler had been killed in 1939? Could millions of lives have been saved? Would Germany have surrendered sooner? Would the Holocaust have unfolded differently? We cannot know for certain. History gives us the events that happened, not the alternate timelines that almost happened. But these failed assassination attempts reveal something important. Even inside one of the most brutal dictatorships in modern history, there were Germans who eventually decided that obedience had a limit. Some were soldiers, some were civilians, some acted alone. Others worked inside a dangerous network of resistance, and many paid for their decisions with their lives. Their plans failed, but their choices remain part of the historical record. Because sometimes the most important question in history isn't simply who won, it's also who was willing to act when almost everyone else remained silent, and that is where the story ends.